I think it's lovely. I think they've been very considerate in the movement of it.
I think it's brilliant. It's a hell of a lot better than the other one, I think. There's more space and everything.
I think it is in a nicer location.
They've done a very, very good job on this location.
It's important to me that it was treated with compassion and correctly.
The Cenotaph is one of a series of monuments erected to commemorate the Great War.
In 1922, the Manchester arm of the British Legion actually set about coming up with a scheme to do a memorial. They employed a guy called Lutyens to do the original designs.
Each town, village or place got their own monument together under the auspices of a central government directive. Lutyens was one of the principal architects involved in designing these monuments. The positioning of the monument was cause for great controversy and debate. The monument was originally intended to go in Albert Square, but it was soon realised that there were huge limitations on that, one of which was they would have to move the Albert Memorial.
Now, the British Legion had actually set a budget of £10,000 for carrying out the works, and to move the Albert Memorial would actually take quite a chunk of that budget.
So other areas were looked at. The area was chosen in St Peter's Square because it is another major square. It's very near the town hall, and the square at that time was much smaller. The point about the Lutyens Memorial is that it's almost a secular memorial, and the proportions of it were very simple and plain, and that's what distinguishes the Lutyens memorials from almost any other. The principal elements of the cenotaph were the cenotaph itself, which supports the catafalque, which is the unknown soldier raised up to heaven. It then has the two pylons either side, which define parts of the monument, and most importantly the war stone. There was great debate about the war stone because you needed to have a monument, a memorial, like a headstone. How do you do that? Lutyens again said, let's keep it simple. We will have a single block of stone, which actually looks square, rectangular. It's not. It's actually got extremely subtle curves on it called entices, which have radii of something like 1,500 feet. In all things, time never stands still, history never stops. It was altered after the last war, with the council then forming a garden area, a wider area with stone seating and trees and grass. The grassed area was so that individuals can place their remembrance crosses in the ground, and that's become an extremely important part of the ceremony everywhere. Again, that worked reasonably well, had the corps of veterans that could line up around it, they could march past and salute the monument. Things then went awry, let's say, when the new tram system came in, and the tram station was interspersed into the monument. It caused problems in how the monument was presented, how the ceremonies worked. You had to get people going around the platform. You have the situation of the Master of Ceremonies of the Cenotaph Memorial conducting the band and the corps of veterans from the platform while the band is on the tracks down below. We've had the Town Hall extension and the library, which took away a huge one side of the square. We had the Peace Gardens, took away another side of the square. So the whole of St Peter's Square suddenly became a huge space, in which made it look like the monument suddenly became very small. And then the metro tram system needs another line. So where's it going to go? Again, lots of debate through the square. So here was a major opportunity now to do something to free up that monument, to put its dignity back again.
The issue with the cenotaph moving, the requirement for it to move at that stage, was that the second city crossing actually comes through St Peter's Square as a construction programme. There was a desire to ensure that it was moved to a new location ready for the centenary. We looked at 11
different sites around Manchester. One of the choices was the present position, bounded by the old town hall and the new town hall extension, which formed a natural part of a square.
The old site of the Cenotaph is founded on top of a church. The original concept that was put forward was a lift and shift type process where the whole thing was lifted on jacks, transported to another location adjacent to the town hall. We very quickly realised, having introduced Stephen Levant architects to the process and using our incumbent engineers, that it was not possible to actually take the Cenotaph across in one piece, and it would have to be deconstructed.
We looked at whether we should actually physically just put it on a trolley and wheel it across the square, as it were. But when we looked at Lutyen's original drawings, because he'd drawn every stone, it would be relatively easy to reverse engineer, as they say.
The solution that was then drawn up was a very detailed programme of investigation.
So we did a lot of investigation work to find out what was going on, because we've got no as-built drawings. And we decided that this would be the safest way and the best way, because we could actually dismantle it, put it back again exactly as it was built.
The surveys told us effectively how the Cenotaph had been constructed, so it was our responsibility with Stephen Levant and our specialist in-house stonemasonry company to determine the most appropriate way of deconstructing in conjunction with the listed building officer in English Heritage. So we ran a series of workshops over several weeks. We brought English Heritage and the listed building officer on the journey of moving away from an overall lift and shift move to deconstruct it in sections, evaluate those sections, move it across and re-erect in its new location.
The listed building and planning permissions actually required us to record everything that we found on site.
Needs to go 20 million further than what you had it last time, yeah?
The visual task sheets, we broke down each of the elements and went into a lot of detail, and we used our in-house companies in order to provide some of the equipment for the big lifts. The first of these lifts was on a January night where we looked at doing the Great War Stone. We had done an outline methodology, then we had done the visual task sheet, but as with any historic monument, there's always the unknowns. And in this particular instance, we weren't sure how it was founded, whether it was on a concrete foundation or not. We removed the pavement flags and we had to alter our methodology on the night due to what we found. We came up with a scheme to sling the Great War Stone and put it onto a temporary pallet. Then we were able to do the new foundation detail in order to put the war stone back to what they'd done originally. So after we'd done the Great War Stone and had moved that out of position, that then freed up the Cenotaph to have the scaffolding put around it.
Part of the deconstruction process, one of the initial elements we needed to do is to fully scaffold and sheet the Cenotaph to allow us to do the surveys. The decision was made that we made the scaffold not just suitable for access, but also from lifting point of view as well. So we actually placed a lifting beam within the construction of the temporary works. All
the scaffolding had to be freestanding. We hadn't put any sort of fixings onto the structure itself. Whilst that work was going on, we went onto the obelisks and started removing those. No serious complications with the obelisks, although when we did take the first stones off, we were then able to find out how they'd actually put the structure up originally. In order to take it down safely and put it back up safely, we would better sort of replicate what they'd done originally. What they'd done was a three-legged Lewis, or St Peter's keys as it's sometimes termed, and we actually had those made up with a company up in Carlisle, and we were able to use those to remove the stones safely down to ground, palleted up, ready for storage.
By the time we'd done the surveys, we recognised that the construction of the Cenotaph with a fallen soldier on top meant that we needed to do a crane lift on the fallen soldier from a safety point of view, but also a preservation point of view, there was a greater likelihood if we tried to use the lifting beams that it would deteriorate.
The fallen soldier is about 2.5 tonne of Portland stone, a single unit, and that was the first challenge that we had in order to remove the cenotaph itself.
So we came up with a route through the lower stones in agreement with English Heritage where we could do a level of breakthrough, effectively underpinning the fallen soldier, and then we put a lifting bed underneath that we used a crane to lift the whole thing off. We agreed we'd take the top section down above the wreaths. We'd stop at the wreaths and we'd re-evaluate how the wreaths had been installed at that stage, because by taking the top of the cenotaph off it would expose the core, and we weren't sure at that stage what was actually retained within the core. Once we'd got to a point where there was a level of confidence how the wreaths had been deconstructed, we still weren't sure we'd be able to get them apart, and the city made the decision with us it was appropriate to actually procure the new stone and start recarving. What we did do was to secure additional services from Hearsts, who are preservation specialists.
The upper level wreaths, although they were also badly eroded, we felt those could be conserved. The method used was to actually clamp together the courses of stone that comprised that part of the monument, and then we could bring them down, conserve them through conservation techniques and materials, all of which are compatible to the stone.
During the big lifts, we had temporary works department on site. I was there personally to supervise any big lifts, just to ensure that everything went as we'd predicted and as we'd written on the visual task sheets.
There had always been the intention of the cenotaph being moved for the centenary. That meant there was quite a level of pressure on programme. There was a significant debate in August 2013 between us, our client, design team, listed building officer. Were we actually out of time at that stage to be able to guarantee that we could have the structure deconstructed, moved and reconstructed prior to November?
Back in January when we started the project, we were made aware that it was an important year with the Centenary Remembrance Day arranged for the 9th of November 2014. So timescale wasn't flexible.
In terms of the re-erection process, it was almost a reversal of what we did in terms of the deconstruction, and the fact that we had a learning curve on the deconstruction made life much easier in terms of being able to replace, but it went back up with millimetre accuracy to the original form.
As part of the rebuilding process, we had identified that some stones did require some attention.
There was a major issue, a philosophical issue, about how much do you repair, how much do you restore.
English Heritage desired the whole of the cenotaph as far as possible to remain untouched, because from their point of view the heritage is in the product.
And we decided that we would replace those elements that were almost completely eroded, because if we didn't, we would lose them.
Some of the stones, some of the carving is almost as crisp as the day it was carved 100 years ago. Some of it is almost unrecognisable and it's crumbling.
One of the crowns required some attention. So we replaced that using a local stonemason sculptor to come and duplicate the details and put in a new crown.
The two crowns that are on the cenotaph over the last 100 years had weathered very differently. Although they were identical when they were initially carved, you could be forgiven thinking they were different. My biggest challenge on the cenotaph was recarving the crown that was on the north face. What I'm trying to do with the stone is to try and get a feeling for the different materials. You've got the jewels, you've got the metal, you've got the fabric, you've got the fur around the edge. Now that is only stone, but you're trying to get that stone to feel like different materials. When it came to fitting the new crown, it had to be slotted in to a recess that was exactly the same shape as the crown. And that process of fitting there's no shortcuts. It's very painstaking, and it takes hours and hours of marking out and recutting in order so it slides in perfectly.
As a team, we did feel it was important that some of the inscriptions were enhanced. They had deteriorated over the years due to natural weathering.
On some parts of the memorial, the lettering was crisp, easy to read, even under dull lighting conditions. On other parts of the memorial, the lettering was very badly weathered, and in fact it wasn't legible at all.
So one of the elements was to increase the grassed area, which allows a greater opportunity for people placing their individual tributes. And in the centre of the grassed area is the central path, the new central path, and that's tapered. And again, that's tapered, picking up elements that Lutyens had on his drawings. So when you look at the monument from the town hall doorway, the tapering effect makes it look much bigger and longer.
The other element that came into this in terms of the new setting was a particular requirement for the type of stone. We actually did testing on the existing stone and mortar to get as close a point as possible from two separate quarries down in Poole Dorset.
One new element that we were asked to incorporate was a memorial wall. Again, taking a lead from Lutyens. It's a solid stone wall. It's not clad because we wanted to have this solidity, this feeling that it will be there forever. It's a battered wall, which means it has a slope on the inside. The reason for that is so that when memorial plaques or carvings are placed against it, when you're standing looking at it, it lines up with your eyes. So the idea was to have this area which at one time is public, but also can be used in a kind of private capacity. People can sit on the bench, which is again without back, so that it can face either way. You can contemplate the monuments on the wall, or you can contemplate the grassed area or the main monument itself. The principle of accessibility is also really important. So now every access to that area is accessible to all.
We actually achieved programme date to reconstruct the cenotaph to the original date that we'd anticipated. The core management team for the deconstruction reconstruction process really came from the experience that we'd had on the main building works at the Town Hall Extension Central Library.
We give thanks also for the work of those who have designed and built this new place of remembrance, and the skill of those who have worked so hard to remove the cenotaph and rebuild it here, stone by stone. May we too be built together in one community as a worthy memorial to those who work and long for peace.
They will grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today.
The selection of the team, the way it's worked, has been brilliant. I mean, as an architect, you couldn't ask for better.
We were aware that obviously it's of historical significance and it is an important monument. We were employed for our skills in both the restoration and conservation fields, and we do have a sensitivity as to what's required on these particular types of work.
I've worked on graded listed buildings before as part of my overall career development, but certainly not on the scale of this.
In order to do the work, we did put a small team of people together, people that have been employed with us long term.
Everybody was just determined this would work, and that determination and that drive has gone right through the contract. And not just with the contractors, you've got the whole of the town hall, the whole client side, if you like. Everybody was willing this to happen and make it happen, and they did.
Very positive feedback coming from the veterans groups. Our thanks must go to the veterans themselves because they played a part in this relocation.
I think the project's been handled very sensitively, very well. We've been kept up to date all along. Every now and again we'd get a nervous phone call saying we're about to take the rose off from the cenotaph, we're hoping it doesn't fall apart, but it's been exemplary the way that the very careful heritage work has been carried out, and you can see the result of that today. We're delighted with the setting.
I think it's gone very well. I think it's a great relief to the many people and organisations that have been involved, worked so incredibly hard over the last 12 months to make sure everything was in place for today. I thought the service was great. What was also, I think, quite revealing and actually reassuring was the number of additional people who clearly were able to participate in the event.
This is for everybody in Manchester and everybody in the surrounding areas. It has to be.